Hello and welcome back to the worst War Machine channel on the internet. I'm Malorian and this is Malorian Weekly. Now, I'm going to quickly tell you what we're covering today and then we're going to have to quickly get into some little disclaimers before we go any further. So, today we're going to be talking about why Asphyxious the Sanctified, I'm going to be calling it Gaspy 4 from now on, was a mistake. Making this model the way it was an absolute mistake. Now, here's the disclaimers. First of all you Crix players out there, you're all going to be like, come on. We have a faction of infantry. The only thing we have to keep us competitive right now is Gaspy 4. How dare you try and take this away from us? I hear where you're coming from. I don't completely agree, but I understand why you're angry, but you're wrong. The other part of you might be like, oh, Malorian, there you go on. You just hate War Machine. You hate Privateer Press. Every single time you come out here and complain, you know what, Malorian, you're destroying the community. Get out of here with all your negativity. I don't agree with you with that either. I love War Machine. I think Privateer Press, for the most part, does an amazing job. I'm a press ganger. I push this job. It actually is like a job. I push this game out to everyone that I can, getting them playing it. But just like how you might enjoy a comfy shirt, it's all nice and soft just the way you like it, but then you get a pine needle in it and it's scratching you. You're like, man, I just can't enjoy my shirt because there's one little poke. That's what Gaspy 4 is right now. It's a real problem that we can easily fix. Well, not you and I. Privateer Press can easily fix. And then after that, we can just go back to loving it again. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to bring this up and really point out why Gaspy was such a mistake so that Privateer Press can hopefully realize it and fix it and not make these mistakes in the future. So to start with all off, if I'm going to go and I'm going to prove to you that Gaspy was a mistake, let's actually even look to see what Gaspy is, just very, very quickly. So, Asphyxious the Sanctified is a mercenary Iron Lich unit. It is Focus 5, Speed 6, Strength 8, Mat 7, Rat 3, Defense 14, Armor 17, Command 9. It is a construct with flying. It has 17 boxes. It has a weapon called the Nullifier, which is a range 2 P plus S 16. It has several rules, like for being a mercenary, and works for convergence and crits. It is a partisan convergence, partisan crits to kind of make that work too. They have activate annihilation servitors because it has 3 little servitors that comes with it. It can always be making more. It's a battle group controller. It has leadership constructs so that while in this model's command range, other friendly construct models gain bloodthirst. We have a limited battle group, which actually allows it to get all those things from all those factions. Malign alignment, which is making it so that while this model is in play, models in its unit and information and War Jackson's battle group get Dark Shroud. It also has Soul Taker. It can go and call souls. And then it also has a couple of spells here. It has Caustic Mist, it has Flicker, and it has Hellfire. I usually actually forget that Hellfire is on the card, but it's something that's actually still there. So that's everything. 14 points for that package. So Malorian, why are you saying that this was a mistake? Well, let's kind of get into this here. The first thing I want to talk about is the points. Now, know that I'm going to go past the points later. I actually did a video before this where it was really obvious right from the very beginning that Gaspy should have been more points. When you compare it to other things and add up all the abilities the best you can, actually in that video, we came to a bare minimum of 17 points. And that was with a whole bunch of things. You're like, I'm not sure how many points to give this. Let's say it's 1, and it got up to 17 points, which would be feeling about right. Should probably be even higher, but hey, this is where we are. Now, again, we're going to start off with points, but we're going to go to a lot of other things later, so don't worry. This is just kind of like the kickoff. Now, the points here is really important because this thing is vastly cheaper than it should be. One of the things I want to share is 2 polls I put out in the last week. The first one was kind of looking like, okay, what are kind of like the big broken things you're seeing right now that are very popular in the meta, especially over with mercenaries and stuff. And I had a simple question saying that if you could pick one, what would you put in your list? Would you rather put Gaspy 4, 2 Death Archons, or Malvin or Mayhem. Okay, those 3 options, if you could be picking which one, what would you do? Now, I very specifically didn't say anything about points in that. I could actually say, like, assuming that they were all the same point cost, which would you take? But that would be leading you in the study, right? In that kind of survey, if you're already thinking points, you might be thinking like, oh, so this person's just trying to go and make an argument for points. Okay, I'm going to go and say something that's in relation, trying to basically throw off what you're trying to do with this analysis. Whereas if I just pose it as which ones you rather take, even if you think of it in points in mind, obviously you're going to be taking the thing that's the best power for the points it is, right? So you're going to be taking whatever has the most power packed into the point package. Now, unsurprisingly, the big winner by a massive margin was Asphyxious 4. Now, again, we're talking about points, and wouldn't you know it, Asphyxious 4, which was the most popular that everybody would want to take, is only 14 points, whereas the Death Archon is 16 points, and Malvin and Mayhem is 17 points. So weird. You would think that if value was directly correlated to points, that people would want the thing that's the more points, right? If I have a 2-point solo and an 8-point solo, what do you want to have in your list? Well, probably the 8 one, because it's really powerful, right? And if you're trying to think like, oh, well, if they're all balanced, then it kind of depends, then everything should be equal. That's not what we saw here. We saw tons of Gaspys, which probably means right away that you could be making that Gaspy, that 16 or 17 points, changing nothing else, and that would just be helping to balance it. But I wanted to do one more because I felt this would be the right way to go. And so what I did is I went over to the Cygnar group. They're a great group there. They think of Gaspy as an enemy, not so much of it as an option because, hey, it doesn't work for Cygnar. And so I came out there saying, hey, Privateer Press game design test. If I was making this brand new warjack called I think I called it like the Celestial or something like that. And what I really gave it was the exact stat line that Gaspy has. I said it had flight. I gave it that weapon, assuming the +2 for Dark Shroud, so POW 18. And then for boxes, I just said it's 30 boxes because even though Gaspy only has 17, you have 5 focus. Now, I said that it had its whatever is the rule where you automatically get 3, just like Malvin and Mayhem type thing. So I said you automatically getting 3, assuming those other 2 are going to be using to always mitigate damage, which basically keeps it to that 30 boxes. Now note, I didn't talk about any of those other special rules we talked about. And then I said, how many points would you make this model? And I got some very interesting results that came from that. The most popular option that came from this was actually 18 points. 18 points for this flying warjack that automatically gets all of this focus. The next popular one was 16, and the next popular one after that was 22. And this is a little aside from a stats thing. That's not what you expect, right? You would expect something like a bell curve and be like, okay, so we're going to kind of see where the average is. But no, our curve looks like wee, wee, wee. And not only that, like apparently people just like even numbers. That could be a thing, but they just kind of like skip 20, right? Like you got back over from 18 to 22, skipping all that stuff in between. And you actually had like the 17 and the 19 before you got to the actual 20. So a weird distribution, but either way, again, I had the option on there for 14 points and nobody went with that. We're looking at, 18 points is what this thing should be, and that's before all the other stuff, right? The unit and the souls and the spells and the blah blah blah. So critically under cost. So that is a big mistake right there. I could be like, oh, there's your 10-minute video, there's my proof. Gaspy's a problem because it's not enough points, but I feel that's not far enough. And this is where we're going to get into the real meat of this video, because while I was trying to get this information, talking about Gaspy with that first post, somebody came out there. I should have gone and found out and given them credit, but they said Gaspy 4 was a game design abomination. And in fact, you know what? When I was going to first make this video, I was going to call this that. I was going to be like, Gaspy 4 was a game design abomination. But wouldn't you know, everyone's going to be like, oh, Malorian, clickbait, blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever. I'll give it a more common name. Then obviously like Gaspy was a mistake then, so it's not so clickbaity. But either way, when I first saw that, I was like, no way. That is going too far. It's one thing to say it's not enough points, but a game design abomination? I mean, like, come on. That's just not really right whatsoever. And then I started thinking about it. And the more I started thinking about how this was actually set up, the more I realized that, oh, this is actually a huge game design mistake, if not an abomination. So let's get into that part now. So the first thing I want to be talking about is hashtag game design, game space or design space. That's what Hungerford always said, hashtag design space. And the idea of what they're trying to say there is that it's one thing to be saying War Machine is this, we're going to keep on producing this, and I can be making this new unit and this and this and this. But unless I start creeping out and trying out other design space, it's all going to feel a little bit samey, right? Everything is just like, oh, it's a little variant of that, nothing very different. Whereas when you start looking into hashtag design space, that's where like, what if we had battle engines? What if we had colossals? What if we had structures? What if we had a caster that was two-caster with Rias and Saren, right? There's a lot of very interesting things you can do when you start looking into this different design space. So design space as itself. So the fact that we're saying like, hey, we're going to have, those juniors you had before, those tiny little 4-point solos that were like, weak, but they did a little bit of support. What if we basically had like an Archon that's also a junior and it was like super powerful and then should also be lots of points. But that is a big, huge like design space you could be looking in for that. So, okay, if that's where Privateer Press was coming from, they knocked it out of the park. They found something that was definitely not there before. But let's go now and talk about why different pieces of it was a real design space, abomination. So with this here, the first thing I want to say is, what is the game design of this model? What is it trying to do? What is it trying to achieve? And if we kind of look at what the rules were and what it was trying to do, is like, well, it is a beater. It is a unit you can be taking that is really, Gaspy plus some little friends, but it is going to get in there. It's going to smash things. It's going to debuff things and bring its armor down. I'm going to be rushing things in and making them faster. My battle group is going to be stronger as well. I can have clouds out there. This is what was it trying to, it seems like it's supposed to be like Smash, like we're going to be, like how Asphyxious is powerful and kept on getting like different and powerful. Well, now it was destroyed Bomadeus, and now it came back and it's the strong thing here out for revenge. It's gonna go and get you. Okay, I guess that's something you could be saying that we want to be designing, is this kind of super solo that is just really aggressive, debuffs, sends things out, and sure, why not? The main thing there is kind of like the real design space is that super solo, but then it's also designed to do these other things. Okay, that's what you're trying to do. Well, with that, some of the problems and what they did from like a game design for this model, for its design space, was just how anti-infantry, not anti-infantry, anti-living it is. There is a real problem right now in War Machine where so much stuff is anti-living. You do not want to be a living model in this game right now because something's after your soul, something's after your corpse, things are getting bonuses against you. Depending on what spells you're after, it's only going to affect you if you're living. It is really bad in this game to be living. And adding something else that just perpetuates this even more, what does that even fix? Even as little clouds it puts out corrosion. Well, if you run a jack or something like that, even like a solo into a corrosion cloud, who cares, right? One little point maybe, no big deal. Unless you're infantry. And so this is just something where already living was in so much trouble, infantry was in so much trouble, and now it's even worse. Like, why would you do this, right? It's like seeing, if you're on the Titanic and you see the Titanic sinking, you're like, what if we blow up another hole? It's like, no, that's the wrong way. You don't want to be going that way. You want to be patching the hole that's there. And they didn't do that. And something I think about too is, again, where did Gaspy 4 come from? Well, Omodeus killed him. Okay, we saw that in the Henchhold Scrolls. So now Gaspy wants to kill the living? Shouldn't this actually be like you get +2 charges against infernal models? Wouldn't that be way better? You know, at the time, infernals were sweeping across. They needed something to fight it. And now Gaspy is like, hey, any construct models around me, you get +2 inches of threat if you're charging an infernal. Let's get 'em. Vengeance. Yeah, that would be great. You know, something in the game that is more anti-infernals. Okay, that's fantastic. But instead, they said, hey, you see those living models crying in the curb? Let's go shit on them. It's like, what? Why would you do that? But that's what they did. So that was a big mistake. The next thing here I want to be talking about is just these army-wide buffs. I mean, it's really hard to try and balance something that buffs everything, right? Because obviously that just really helps you lean into something and push it up to 11, right? That's why Sloane is good, because her feat is like, hey, my whole battle group gets to shoot an extra time. So what do? Take a massive battle group. Oh, and it's just something that's, from a game design purpose, it's almost impossible to balance, because the larger the game is, or if the game stays the same, but people lean into that benefit, you can just turn it so far. And there's nothing really limiting that. And we have 2 spots here where you're doing an army-wide buff, really. I mean, first of all, that whole part of charging living is for constructs. Well, if you just make it so that, you know, you have your jacks you're taking with your caster, the jack that you're taking with Gaspy. You can always take other constructs as well, like Malvin and Mayhem, or more jacks or whatever. And then, great, the whole army, if there's any living there, choo-choo, we're all going to go. And at the same time, hey, I have Dark Shroud, my little servitors have Dark Shroud, and my jacks have Dark Shroud as well. So you can very easily get Dark Shroud everywhere. For those who have played with Ragman and doing the same thing, it is very hard to apply. You have to kind of like get the model to the right spot, and then I'm going to come here and I'll cast it, and it's going to catch these models here. It's like, well, no, I can just kill bots, go, fly to all the places you need. And in fact, something that you might have noticed from the way it works, for the little servitors, they have to be in the control range, but the jacks do not. So they can literally just run off wherever they want and be applying that wherever you need it. So you can basically apply it across the entire enemy formation extremely easily. And that's just wrong, that this one model is going to buff all these things. Like, sure, you have things like Prospero in Crucible Guard. I want to call it Convergence, but I knew I was wrong. In Crucible Guard, well, it kind of has the same thing, right? War jacks around it, get the +1. I think it's to hit, but either way, okay, I can kind of see that, but it's limited. It's a small thing. It's a small effect. He's not as, you know, invincible as Gaspy 4, is hard to kill. And instead of doing something like that, like a +1 to hit, it would be like, well, what if instead we got 2 more inches of threat and basically 2 more strength, right? Because it doesn't really matter whether I lower your armor or raise my strength, it's going to kind of work out to the same thing. Like, that's massive. And it's not just to one small thing, right? It's not just like to Gaspy's battle group or whatever. No, it's, you can go and share it out to everywhere. So that is just something that, as a game design, it was designed to be abused, right? As we said, with Sloane, you play Sloane and you say, oh, that's how I abuse it? All right, turn that up to 11. And you don't even really have to do too much here to abuse it. The whole debuff for armor thing is really for free. You don't have to even work around it. And then the whole charging thing, you're kind of already forced into it, right? Out of your 75 points or whatever you're playing between your existing battle group and Gaspy's battle group, there's already going to be like a critical mass of constructs already, so you're kind of already doing it. And it's just, I don't understand why they'd be allowing you to have 2 knobs and turn them both to 11 and think that that was going to be okay and something that they're like, oh, it'll be fine. The next thing here I want to talk about is the fact that it's even a unit. Now, if you are to do a strategy like we were just talking about, where like, okay, this is going to be something where it's going to be designed to encourage you to be taking jacks. We want you to be taking a bunch of constructs, so there's going to be a whole bunch of jacks. Okay, that is a fine game design. If that was the whole purpose, that would be all right. However, those have weaknesses. It has weaknesses because you don't have the other models there to be trading like pawns. You don't have the infantry in the front to be trying to get in the way. And you don't have the infantry to score those zones. Any unit you want to try and take to be putting in for scoring the circle zones is less jacks you can take. The fact that this is a unit means you no longer need to care about this, right? You don't need to worry about not scoring rectangles. There's a lot of other constructs out there. But the fact that this is now a unit, we're like, oh, there's a circle on there? Gaspy, let's go. And the way it's designed too, it preys on other units. So if Gaspy 4 is up against another unit trying to fight for a circle, it's like, all right, well, let's go. We're all going to charge in there really fast. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take your souls. I'm going to be getting more focus next turn and go crazy. I can control you with my clouds. Like, it is just from a scenario point of view there, when you think about what it is to be a unit, crazy that Gaspy is able to fill in that role. Like, why is it even that? It could have just been a solo, right? You don't need to have a unit in there that, for starters, makes it easier to go and debuff everything, where your little kill bots just fly wherever you need it. But then you also have them to fly out there and get in the way to play as pawns. You have them there so you can go and score circle scenario pieces. Why? Like, this is not helping you. There's some small little spots there where being a unit means that you could be having, the spell on you from, now I can't remember what it's called. The one that makes it to a unit can't declare orders and stuff like that. Sure, there's a few minor interactions like that, but well worth it. In my Magnus 2 list, it was always kind of awkward, like, oh, what should I do for the unit? Should I put in like a little Kayaza unit there? I was just like, I guess I'll put that 5 points in there. So I try and find something else. Now screw that. That is never a question in my mind. My Kayazi are getting dust because I don't need them. If there's anything I need a unit for, I got Gaspy now. And it just fills that in for free. And I think part of this too, to kind of link in with this whole idea there of having these units is also kind of like the idea of having those clouds as well, right? That multi-purpose part where it's a beater that does these other things, right? Like, you don't need to have that, where like now it's a solo that does the unit thing and the cloud wall thing, right? Like, normally it'd be like, okay, if I want clouds, I'm going to take Gorman, I'm going to try and make one here, or maybe I have to try and take a unit of trenchers and they're going to be doing something. No, I got my Gaspy anyway, so boop, boop, put on my clouds. I hope you have an answer, because if not, hey, that's even more advantage to me. And it's just little extra pieces that was not really needed to be added on for what the simple design space could have been. The next thing I want to be talking about is its battle group, because this should have been the weakness of the model. Whenever you take a junior, the weakness is that you have to take a battle group. And what that means is that you need to have extra points of jacks that are allocated here. And so that means that you have less options in your army, as this has to go to jacks, and that now makes it so that you have to be very careful with this junior, because if they die, those jacks that are underneath it go inert. And that's really bad, because it's not just like autonomous where it can still walk around and just do things without focus. It's just, it does not activate until your caster has to go over there and spend it, basically its action to go and reignite it, or whatever the rule's called. Like, those pretty much never happens. When things go inert, the game's kind of over type thing, right? And so that's the risk, right? That's the big thing, where like Gaspy was just a solo and not a junior with like focus and stuff. Hey, it could just go out and be aggressive, but now it has to be careful because I have these other points tied in with me. However, the way that it was designed, it is no longer a weakness, because for starters, Gaspy makes whatever jacks it takes better because it has that Dark Shroud already applied to it as well. So, is it bad to usually be taking like 8 points to a Stalker? No, because it's Dark Shroud, and now it's amazing. Stabby, stabby, stabby. Oh, you want to put a Toro on it? Sure, I guess it's now like basically P plus S20. Like you're literally making these things better by putting it on him. And in a game of piece trading, it just really means you send in the Toro first, and then you do Gaspy later. Sure. No big deal. But the way that they did this, no, it's all fine. Plus, it's leading into what this model wants to do anyway, which says, I want to have a lot of constructs around me so that choo-choo, let's go, we can all charge. And so again, because it's like, hey, constructs get the charge, he wants to have a battle group. A lot of times I take 2 heavies on Gaspy because it just kind of makes them better. And there's nothing I need to really hold back with, right? It's just... Sure, why not? I put this on Gaspy instead of my caster, and now I can just make it have, +2 strength, basically. Sure, yeah, I'll do that all day, every day. It just means, again, with my piece trading, the jacks go first, and then Gaspy last. Just something you do in piece trading anyway. So it just really did not hit what it was supposed to there. Now, let's talk about what this model is as its core, which is a mercenary model. Now, for you Crix folks out there, they're like, oh, you're picking on us. No, I'm picking on me now. I'm a mercenary, and I should not have access to this model. This model is a mercenary because Privateer Press didn't know what they were doing, and they screwed up. And this is just straight up. Privateer Press made a huge mistake. They understand it now. When they were first releasing all this Riot Quest stuff, everything was a mercenary because like, oh, if I want these things to work in multiple factions, I have to make them a mercenary. That's the only way to do it. And as a merc player, I was like, yeah, that's great. Give me everything. But what it really did was make it so it was in places where it really wasn't supposed to be in the beginning. And so with right here, if you just would have said like this is a model that is, it's a convergence model, straight up right there. Okay, it's a convergence model, and then have another rule in there that's partisan, Crix, or have another rule in there saying that in the themes for Crix, that you're allowed to take Gaspy in these certain themes, or something like that. You could just make it so it's not mercenaries and make sure it's just in the spot where it should be, because hey, it's a Crix caster that got fixed by convergence. You can even make the argument it shouldn't be Crix at all. So Crix, you should also be feeling lucky you have it whatsoever. It's probably should only be a convergence model. But because the way they want to design it so it can be shared around, okay, well, I guess now it's going to be a mercenary and mercs have access to it. And this is a whole nother faction that's going to be getting this now. And part of the problem here, and I think this is something I want to be leading to with this, is that a real problem with this from a game design perspective is the haves and the have-nots now. Gaspy is such a powerful model that if you can take it in any of those 3, if you're a Crix player, if you're a Convergence player, if you're a Merc player, if you're in a theme that can take Gaspy, first thing you do, you take it. It's automatic. So they're the haves. Everybody else are the have-nots. They didn't make like a Kruger, super solo, or Baldur, or whatever one from Hordes, right? To try and capture other factions, something for Signar. Like, they didn't spread around the love. They basically said, like, here's Gaspy, here's Nemo. A little while later, they did make the Blight one, so they're kind of getting there. That one's just for one faction, but again, Nemo 4 is the mercenary when it shouldn't be. And so we have these definitely strong haves and have-nots. And so if they were going to be taking this super risky delve into this design space, at the very least, to try and balance these things, there should have been something out there so that everybody has one, right? When they got into Colossals, everybody had one, right? Well, first they did the Colossals, and then Gargantuans came and all that type of stuff. But they made sure everything was fair. In this case, they're like, hey, mercs? Why? Why did they do this? And it's just a bad way of doing it, where if you have a player base where they're not all mercenaries, they're not all Crix players, they're not all convergence, and you are pissing off everyone that can't get this model. If you would have balanced it properly, maybe that'd be less of an issue. But because you went so far with it, sorry, This is going crazy. I'm yelling here. Because you went so far with it, you just took that chance that you were going to be making this big disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And so from a game design space, again, this was a real mistake. Last thing here, I want to be talking about this model, which kind of goes to what I just said, is that they just did too much. When you want to go and explore, hashtag design space type thing, you want to be like, okay, what if it was, like this battle engine, which is really just like a big solo, couple of extra rules. Okay, let's go type thing, right? But for this, there were so many things they piled on top. Like, what if we take an Archon, but give it focus and make it a unit and give it a big leadership, and also, it's a spell because it's a caster, so there's lots of spells in there, and it gets souls. Yeah, souls are important too. And it's going to debuff things. That can also go to his battle group. Like, all these things, you'd think, if nothing else, if you want to edge into this idea of like these super solos, start small, start a couple, see how they're working, and go from there. But they just jumped in the deep end. They just said, like, throw it all in there. Let's just make this thing crazy, which was maybe okay if you were to make it a caster, because casters are like that, right? Casters have all these things. You expect to see a lot of new stuff on a new caster. But on this type of thing here, where you're making a caster type effect on a little super solo, you can't go that far. Otherwise, you risk making these huge, massive mistakes. So with all this together, where they made it super anti-living instead of making anti-infernal, because you made it with these huge super army-wide buffs, 2 of them that can be super abused, because you made it so that it's a unit for some reason and fulfills that role in the army for scenario and bogging things down, because you made it so that its battle group weakness was now actually a strength, and because you did the whole mercenary thing instead of actually making it where it's supposed to go, and because you just went so far and push it to 11 rather than just saying, hey, let's take some steps in the right direction and see where this game design takes us. Was that poster right? Was Gaspy 4 a game design abomination? I think it might be. I think it might be. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Privateer Press, but if I was your boss and I needed to, if you are a rules developer and we're like doing our yearly review and it's like, okay, what'd you do this year? Oh, Gaspy 4. We got to talk about that, right? Like, I really hope that you're having these conversations. So what can we do as players? Nothing. There's nothing we can do as players at this point now. It is out. It's something you have to deal with. My next video is going to be how to, as players, deal with and battle Gaspy, given the rules that it has. So, okay, that's something we could do, is try and share some secrets and maybe find some way to take down Godzilla type thing. But otherwise, what should Privateer Press learn from this? I really hope Privateer Press uses Gaspy 4 as a real case study in how not to do future game design. Hashtag design space is great. I love the fact that you're trying new things, but you have to think of the role it's actually going to play. All the rules you're putting into there, you have to think of those interactions and what they're going to do. And if you start getting to a spot where you're like, well, there's a lot of stuff, so it's hard to really gauge what the interactions are as an overall, then you probably did too much, right? You don't jump into like some super crazy thing and just be like, well, I hope that works. You ease your way in, you see how it works, and then you just develop from there. That's the responsible way to go about this. So what I hope they do, if they were to say like, well, fine, Malorian, if you're so smart, what do we do with Gaspy now? You have 2 choices. Roll back its rules, or 2, roll up its points, or I guess 3, a little bit of both. Now, I don't think that at this point they should change the rules. People have gone into this already knowing what it's supposed to do. So until you get to Mark 4, I would actually kind of leave the rules as they are, unfortunately. You know what? I'm going to take that back already, because then I'd be making everything I said completely wrong. I hate rolling and changing rules, But in this case, I feel the rules are so bad, you kind of have to. So what were our biggest things that we said that we'd have to change here? Well, the first thing here is the fact that it's anti-living. Change that rule, give it a new word, whatever you want to make it for that, so that now you get +2 inches for your charges against Infernals. Great. Fixes that one. Next thing you're going to do, change those army-wide buffs. And we're going to do that by no longer making it a unit. Gaspy 4 is now going to be a solo. But Malorian, what about our servers? Okay, those little servitors you have there, that's great. Once per turn, it can go and make one little solo, and it can have a maximum of 3 on the table. Okay, that's great. You now have something you can use it for. It could go off, and it can go and like get in the way or do something, but that's it. However, only Gaspy 4 is going to have Dark Shroud, not the unit, not those other little solos it's making, not its battle group, and that's going to fix a whole heck of a lot. Also, only Gaspy 4 can be trying to be getting souls for himself, not the little bots as well. We're just going to take that away. Again, like they're solos now. They're not part of the unit. And I'm actually tempted to take the whole soul thing away completely. And then this is after you make all those changes, then I would make it bumped up to 17 points. Because even then, as this super solo that has, 5 focus and all this stuff, it still does enough work that it should be a 17-point model. It is, at that point, like a 1-to-1, I feel, a lot closer to Malvin and Mayhem. And how many points was... Oh, right, 17 points. So I think that that's kind of now the right way to go about this. Anyway, that is my video talking about why Gaspy 4... Asphyxious the Sanctified was a mistake. Hopefully, after all this long half an hour rambling about it, you agree with me. If you do, hooray. I'm glad I didn't disappoint you. But if you don't, I would love to hear about this. Please post it down in the video below. I'm sure a lot of people did that before they even watched the video. Like, Malorian, you're wrong. He's perfect. Stop picking on me because I play Crix. Again, I always get these things, but you know what? If you have a real thought about like, you know what, Malorian, I think you're missing this. I think this is the reason why that rule is here. It was not a game design mistake. This was important. I would love to have those conversations. So otherwise, please put them down below. I'll catch you later. Bye.